If you're new to CJX, one of the most important things to learn early on is what the best loadout is for each operator. That's what I'm going to do today. This is kind of like a throwback to my old Siege School videos. I haven't done one of these in a very, very long time. But I'm going to go through every single operator, both attacker and defender, and tell you what the best loadout is for each of them. So we're going to talk about their primary guns, their secondary gadgets. And for some of them, we'll tell you which options are good in different situations, which ones are better overall. I'm also not going to go through attachments for every single gun because that's going to take way too long. So I'm just going to give you very generic overall rules, which I follow for the most part, with just very few exceptions. For every single gun, if you have the option for a magnified scope, I always go magnified A. I personally like it the most. I think it's the best. If you can't get a magnified scope, I will always default to red dot C. I know other popular choices are like Reflex A and Reflex B, but I personally prefer red dot C. I think it's just the cleanest and it has just a tiny little dot you have to aim at. Super easy. Iron sights for the most part are never really worth it. Maybe run them on shotguns just because you don't need a sight. Now for muzzle attachments, my default is always flash hider across the board for every single weapon. Except for DMRs, you always go muzzle brake. And then for some assault rifles and SMGs, I do run muzzle brake if it just feels better. And then otherwise, compensating suppressor, I very rarely pick unless it's for more of a meme pick. And then for grips, vertical grip is always the default. It's the only one that helps recoil, so it's the only one worth running. Angled grip, you never run because all it does is make you reload faster, which is useless. And then if you're not going to run vertical grip, run horizontal grip because it makes you run faster. You only really run this on weapons where you have no recoil to begin with. A lot of defenders. And then underbarrel, it's just a laser, which increases your aim down sight speed by barely anything. Never worth running. Don't ever equip it. But we're going to start with the attackers. First, right off the bat, is Striker, who is the new reworked recruit. I'd definitely say right off the bat, for primary weapons, the M4 is the better weapon. The M249 is decent, but they did nerf LMGs recently where they make you slower. And also the reload just takes forever. So the M4 is just overall a good gun, and you should probably always bring it as recruit. And then for secondary weapons, you have a pocket shotgun or a pistol. A lot of people will usually say, go for the pistol because it actually helps you in a gunfight. But the generic trend that you'll probably see throughout this video is that if you have a pocket shotgun available to you, always take it. Because ideally, if you're switching to your secondary weapon, it probably means that the person's low already. So a pocket shotgun's going to probably do the same thing as a pistol. And the pocket shotgun's also good for destruction, setting up rotates, whether it's on attack or defense. And then the new recruit doesn't have an actual unique gadget. They can just bring 2 of any of the secondary gadgets. And I would say by far the best option is just defaulting to pocket EMPs and then hard breach charges. This allows you to be a one-man army, and you can get hatches or walls by yourself because you can EMP the bandit or the kaid or the mute and then breach the wall or the hatch. And then if you don't need the hard breach and you want to swap off of it, the backup option would be flashes and probably smokes. This would just be a utility dump thing where you can either get rid of ADSs or you can flash people out of the spots, or you can just smoke out sight and then flash sight as well to just double disorient the defenders. And that way you also don't need to bring someone specifically to have smokes. Striker has smokes. And next attacker we have Sledge, also known as Master Chief, and this one's pretty straightforward. You have either the L85 assault rifle or the M59 shotgun. Always go assault rifle. L85 is the better choice. Shotguns have their place, but they're better on defense because you just sit and wait, versus on attack you have to push in. And imagine sprinting with a shotgun when someone mows you down with an SMG. Just not going to work out. So you run the L85, it's overall just one of the most beginner-friendly guns in the game, low recoil, high damage. And then you only have the one pistol, so you can't choose anything. And then for secondary gadgets, always go frags, because you'll probably use frags to flush people out of spots and then use your good gun to kill them. Or you can use them to get rid of bulletproof gadgets on site. The next operator is Thatcher. He has 3 primary weapons, L85, AR-33, and the M59 shotgun again. You're mainly going to be choosing between the L85 and the AR-33, and the L85 is better. It has a higher magazine count, it has higher damage, and just slightly lower fire rate, and overall better recoil. So L85 I think is the clear choice. Again, only one pistol, so you can't really change that. And then for secondary gadgets, you have Claymore or breaching charges. I'd say always go Claymore because you're never really going to use a breaching charge as Thatcher. Thatcher is meant to help support, like Thermite or Ace, break the hard wall. You're not going to be above with breaching charges breaking open the floor. And then next attacker is Ash, who's probably a lot of your guys' mains if you're new to Siege. A lot of people default to her. For Ash, we have 2 primaries, the R4C and the G36C. And while I love the G36C, it is just statistically way worse than the R4C. It has less damage and less fire rate. The only advantage it has is that it has 4 more bullets in the magazine. And I guess better recoil, but that doesn't really matter that much. So always go R4C. And then you have 2 pistols. Doesn't really matter which one you choose, but the M45 does have higher damage but less ammo. And then for secondary gadgets, I always default to Claymores just to cover flank or jump outs. but a lot of people have been running breaching charges. So honestly, either or is fine. It just depends on what you want to do. Breaching charges if you're going above, claymores if you're staying outside. And now we have Thermite, who is probably one of my favorite operators in the game. There's really only one choice. You run the 5.56 XI. He has the M1014 shotgun, which is honestly just like the worst shotgun in the game. It is terrible. You should never run the M1014 if it's an option. You always run the other gun. And then for pistols, same thing as Ash. The M45 is just higher damage. Run that one. And then for secondary gadgets, I always run smokes because I use it to plant. Thermite is a planting operator. Since he breaches open the wall, you run and you plant. You use smokes to cut off sight lines. You could use flashes as well, but smokes last longer. I think it's 10 seconds versus like 4 seconds on a flash. And then we have Twitch, which I'm sure we'll have some controversial decisions on. There's 3 weapons, the F2, the 417, and the SGCQB shotgun. This is the best shotgun in the game, but I still wouldn't recommend running it. It's between the F2 and the 417. The F2 has probably the worst recoil in the entire game, but it has insane damage and fire rate. Now, all that being said, I really can't control this gun that well. If I play it a lot, I can get better at it, but by default, I think the 417 is just better. It's a very, very high damage DMR. And since Twitch is kind of a support operator with her shock drone, you're probably going to be outside a lot, which means the DMR is good for that range and that damage. For secondaries, you have the P9 pistol and then the revolver. I'm personally more prone to the P9 because the revolver, while it has good damage, has really high recoil, and I just tend to miss my shots with it a lot more. Plus, the P9 has like 10 more bullets, so I think that's way better. And then for secondary gadgets, you either have smokes or claymore. I'd probably bring smokes because, again, if you're more of a support operator and you're probably going to be more of a range, you're going to want to smoke to cover the plant and then snipe in with the DMR. Claymore would only make sense if you're going to be like outside on rappel. Next attacker, one of my mains, Monty. He's a shield operator, so not much to show here. Just like Twitch, I prefer running the P9 because I think it's just a better pistol. I don't want to be caught with only 6 bullets as a shield operator. And then for secondary gadgets, this is where you can kind of swap around. I always default to smoke grenades, and then I'll swap to EMP impacts if we need them. I almost never bring hard breach because it's just not really worth it as Monty. And here we have Glaz, the sniper rifle operator. Obviously, you can only pick the one DMR as his main weapon, so that's all you're going to choose. For secondaries, he has a pistol, the Bearing 9 machine pistol, and then the Gon 6. Bearing 9 is obviously going to be the better option because it's the only gun that can really get kills here. Gon 6 if you need utility, but I feel like if you need to break something, just bring frags on secondary gadget instead. But my personal choices is the sniper rifle followed by the Bearing 9, and then for secondary gadget, because Glaz has thermal and it can see through smoke, smoke obviously makes the most sense with him. Use it to combo on his gadget. But if you don't necessarily need it or want it for some reason, frag grenades is always the other choice. I don't think I can ever recommend bringing claymore, I guess, unless you're going to only sit on rappel and just try to bait someone to jump out. And here we have Fuze, who's probably had a lot of your guys' mains as well, because a lot of new players just love explosions, and they default to Fuze for that. Fuze has probably one of the weirdest loadouts for primaries. He has a shield, the AK-12, or an LMG. The AK-12 is, I think, statistically the best gun in the entire game. It has low recoil, very high damage, very high fire rate, and good ammo. So it should be your default pick. Now, if you want to bring more shields, then you can bring out the shield for Fuze. But he does have the worst shield out of all of them. And then I can't really recommend bringing the LMG, again, because LMGs just got nerfed and they're not that great anymore. For pistols, you either have the PMM or the GSH. It's basically just, again, a choice between low ammo but high damage or high ammo but low damage. I always choose high damage, low ammo. And then for secondary gadgets, I do tend to swap a lot on this. You can bring breaching charges if you're going above because Fuze tends to cluster above. And then hard breach charge is also decent if you're going to like fuse a hard wall and then breach it. And then you always have smokes as an option, but you're not really a support operator as Fuze, so I'd just stick to the 2 breaches. And we have another shield operator, Blitz, which very few options here. I think the least amount of options so far. You have no choices on the guns or the shield. And for secondary gadgets, either smokes or breaching charges. I prefer smokes because if I'm going to try to rush someone, I will throw them to smoke to blind them, run in, flash them, blind them again, and then kill them. Breaching charges just doesn't really make much sense if you're trying to rush at them and clear the distance. You don't want to stop to put down a breaching charge on a wall and then run through. And we've reached the final of the Pathfinder operators for attackers. We have IQ. She has a lot of primary options. She has the G8A1, the 5.52 Commando, and the AUG A2. Since the G8A1 is an LMG, it does slow you down, so I don't think it's really worth running on IQ. I always default to the 5.52 Commando. The AUG is also a good weapon. I was always a fan of the AUG because it has a higher fire rate and very slightly less damage, but the AUG takes up a lot of your screen. It is just physically very large. So if you don't want your screen taken up, 5.52 Commando is better for very, very little less damage. And it also has better recoil. You don't have any options on the pistol, you're stuck with the P12. And then for secondary gadgets, I for some reason have claymores equipped, but I feel like I would almost always go with frag grenades instead. But I guess with IQ, you can't really do a whole lot with frags. So claymores are good, I guess, for just default cover your flank. And then breaching charges, IQ doesn't really go above sight and open up the floor, so probably not worth running unless you specifically just want to do that with her. Alright, first DLC operator, we have Buck. He has 2 primary weapons, C8 assault rifle, and then the Camrus marksman rifle. Always go C8, I like it. Camrus is good, but the C8 is just a really strong assault rifle. No options on pistol, stuck with that one. And then for the 2 gadgets, I always prefer stun grenades over claymores because with Buck, you're probably going to be a bit more aggressive since you have a underbarrel shotgun. You're going to open a wall, flash, sight, run in. Versus like putting down claymore and holding an angle doesn't really make much sense with him. And then next we have Blackbeard, who is probably one of the most powerful operators in the entire game. No secondary weapons, just a shield and a primary. I will always go MK17 because with him you're trying to be aggressive. You want an assault rifle. You don't really want a DMR in close range. And a lot of people specifically for Blackbeard run iron sights and a laser to just aim down sight as fast as possible since he's a shield with an assault rifle. And then you always bring frags because with a shield you can just throw grenades from behind the shield. You don't have to expose yourself. It just makes sense. Claymore doesn't really make much sense on Blackbeard. Alright, now we have Capitao, who has 2 options for primaries, the Para assault rifle and the M249 LMG. Again, assault rifles are always better. I go with the Para. It also only has 1 less damage than the M249 and a 30-round magazine that reloads quickly. And then you have a pistol or the Gon 6. I bring Gon 6 just to help clear out some utility of some kind, whether it's a deployable shield, a zombie, whatever. Gon 6 is just better. I rarely use pistols anyways. And for secondary gadgets, it all depends on what you're doing. My default is claymores because we tend to use Capitao on repel. I think if you have to choose a default, I would say impact EMPs, followed by hard breaches, and then claymores as a last resort. And now we're moving on to Hibana, who is the first DLC hard breacher. She has 2 guns, Type 89 assault rifle, and then a shotgun. While this shotgun is really good, the Supernova is really good. Type 89 is just obviously better. So always default to this. The only time I think you should bring a shotgun is if you're going to try to rush like a hatch breach. You drop down your shotgun people. And then for secondaries, you either have a machine pistol or a pistol. So obviously we're going to go machine pistol. And then for secondary gadgets, you have either breaching charges or stun grenades. Since I don't think you really want to risk breaching open the floor as Hibana and risk losing a hard breacher, probably don't bring breaching charges, just bring stuns to help flash out sight as soon as you're going to go for an execute. And now we have Jackal, who loves feet. For primary weapons, we have either the C7E, the PDW9, or the ITA-12L. Never bring the shotgun. Again, attack sucks with shotgun. So it's between the C7E and the PDW9. And I think this might be a bit controversial. I think you should always choose the C7E. Just really good damage, really high fire rate, very low recoil. Again, one of the best guns in the game. Versus the PDW9, which has less damage, same fire rate, but more ammo. I guess if you're going to land headshots for sure, PDW9 just makes more sense, but if you're a body shot warrior like me, C70 is just way better. And for secondary gadgets, always bring smoke grenades because claymores don't really make much sense. The whole point of Jackal is that he clears roamers, so you don't need a claymore to watch for roamers because you're clearing them out. And then you bring smoke grenades to cover plant. And then here's Ying. 2 options for primaries, either the LMG T95 or the shotgun 612. Since I think you should never bring shotguns, always go with the LMG. I had the shotgun selected because I was doing a shotgun video, but LMG just makes way more sense. Since Ying's whole gadget is blinding everyone in sight, run in with an LMG and just mow them down as they're all blind. No options for the pistols. And for secondary gadgets, she has hard breach charges or smoke grenades. Smoke grenades I think is by far the default choice because with Ying, you're probably going to just be spamming smokes and flashes to cover all of sight while your teammate plants. I'd only bring hard breach charges if someone specifically needs them from you. Otherwise, smokes all the way. Now we have Zofia, who used to be probably one of the best operators in the game, and they got nerfed a lot. She has the M762 assault rifle and the LMG. Since she's already a 1 speed, don't bring the LMG. You're going to become a 0.5 speed. Terrible. Always bring the M762. No options for pistols, which is going to become kind of a theme with a lot of these DLC operators. And then for secondary gadgets, claymores, again, if you're going to be on repel or if you're just watching for jump outs, but otherwise hard breach charges if you're just going to try to help get hatches or some walls off site. And here's one of my least favorite operators, Dokkaebi. She has either the DMR Mark 14 or the Boss G Slug shotgun. I think I had that again for a video. Default is always the DMR because why take a shotgun with only 2 bullets when you can take a DMR with 21? Especially ever since they nerfed the fall off damage on the Boss G. On attack, it's just a little bit more rough. For secondary, she has the SMG-12, the C75, and the Gon 6. I think the default is the SMG-12, especially on console. This gun has like very little recoil. It's become a crutch for a lot of console players. C75 should almost never be your choice, so it's either SMG-12 or bring the Gon 6 if you absolutely need some type of gadget destruction. Then for gadgets, she has smokes, impact EMPs, and stuns. I default to stuns because if you call someone, hear them, and then you can flash and push them, that's really good, get a free kill. But if you're going to go for more support, whether it's for plant or for getting breach, swap between smokes and EMPs depending on what your team needs. But default should be stuns. And then here's Lion, who was probably the most overpowered operator in the entire game, now nerfed. He has the V308 assault rifle, 417 DMR, and the SGCQB shotgun. V308 is really, really good, but if you don't want an assault rifle or you just can't control it, run the 417. Almost never run the shotgun unless you're just rushing. For some reason, I have the revolver on him when I really shouldn't. I'm going back to the P9, just like Twitch and Monty always prefer the P9. And then for secondary gadgets, you have frags, stuns, and claymores. Claymores don't really make a whole lot of sense. Frags and stuns make the most sense, because if you're going to line scan someone, you can throw a frag to force them to move while the line scan goes off. Same thing with the stuns. If they're forced to stand still and then you can flash them, they either have to run away and they'll get pinged, or you just push it and kill them. Default frags though, stuns is a secondary for me. And now we're on to Finka. Has the assault rifle, the LMG, and the shotgun. Shotgun's awful, don't ever run it. Again, LMG's not great, so we're left with the spear. Overall, really good assault rifle though. Probably one of the better ones on attack, I would say. And then for pistols, PMM and GSH, just like Fuze, so I'd always run the PMM. And then for secondaries, we have frags, smokes, and flashes. I'd say frags should be probably your default, but stuns are also really good because Finka's boost counters stuns. So you could Finka boost while stunning someone so they're blind and you're not. Now we have another hard breacher, Maverick, who has the M4 assault rifle or the AR-15 marksman rifle. This is the only DMR that only has 10 bullets instead of 20, so I would probably never run it unless, again, you want some type of meme strat. So I'd default to the M4. It's just a really good gun. No options on the pistols, and then for gadgets, either Claymore, Stun, or Smoke. I think the best one for this is probably Smoke. Stun if you want to be more aggressive and push to get kills. Claymore if you want to cover your flank while you're breaching, or you want to do the strat where you put the Claymore down and then you Maverick torch the wall and then the person blows up on the other side of it. But smokes would always be my default choice. I know this doesn't look like Nomad, but this is Nomad. For assault rifles, we have either the AK or the ARX. And a lot of people prefer the AK because it has double the amount of ammo for only slightly less damage and slightly less fire rate, but I always default to the ARX. I think it's just easier to control, my shots feel a lot better, and I kill people faster. And then you have two pistols for secondary, one with a scope, one without. The scope pistol kind of got nerfed to make the recoil really bad. As you can see down here, you can't even see the second shot really, it's just completely off. So I'll always go the normal pistol with very little recoil. And for secondaries, you either have stuns or you have breaching charges. Stuns are my default because I don't really use Nomad as an above breacher. I use her to support the above breachers. So if you have a ram going above, you bring Nomad to cover the flanks and then you try to push into sight with flashes. But if you don't have an above breacher, you can put down the air jabs to cover flanks and then breach above with breaching charges. And this is Thicklock, who has either the F90 assault rifle or the LMG. While this LMG is slightly better than other ones because it doesn't take forever to reload, it's a very quick reload, it still has the slow debuff, so I'd still choose the F90. Especially because the F90 has a much higher fire rate with 10 less damage, which I think makes up for it. And like I said earlier, always bring the pocket shotgun over the pistol, just makes more sense. For secondary gadgets, you have smokes, frags, or impact EMPs. The main use of Gridlock is throwing down a bunch of tracks on site to prevent defenders from pushing the diffuser. So smokes combos with that. You throw the smokes, you throw a bunch of Gridlock tracks, and then just prevent the defenders from pushing up. So I think smoke is always the default pick. I would very rarely ever pick frag or impact EMP on her. And then here's Nokk with the paper bag head. She has either the FMG-9 or the 612. Again, shotguns suck. And since Nokk is trying to sneak into sight, but will still need at least a little bit of range, the FMG-9 just makes way more sense. For secondaries, you either have the 5.7 or the Deagle. Since you're probably going to just try to go for as much damage as possible, Deagle just makes a lot more sense. 71 damage with 8 bullets is a lot. And the recoil on it is not that bad. It's not like Revolver or the Nomad pistol. And then for secondary gadgets, since Nokk is probably going to be on her own just trying to go for kills, frags make total sense. Impact EMPs and hard breach charges don't really make a lot of sense because with Nokk you're trying to sneak into sight, not let them know where you're coming from. And then we have Amaru, who's my favorite rusher in the entire game. 50-50 on her loadout here. For primary weapons, if I'm going to like grapple up to a window on the site's floor and then just run across that floor to get to sight, G8A1 makes more sense. Even though it makes you slower, you need that range. I will bring the shotgun though if I'm going to grapple above sight and then break a hatch and then drop in with a shotgun. Because you're going to be in sight, close quarters with everyone, shotgun just makes more sense there. No matter what primary run though, I always bring the SMG-11 secondary because it's just insanely overpowered. And you wouldn't bring a pocket shotty on Amaru because you're not going for above breaching. You're just, again, going for frags. And for secondary gadgets, again, it depends. If I'm on the LMG, I'm bringing stun grenades. If I'm on the shotgun, I'm bringing hard breach charges because with the shotgun, I'm probably going to break a hatch and then drop in. And if the hatch is reinforced, you need the hard breach charge for that. So whatever primary pick, you pick the secondary right below it. And now we're about halfway through the DLC operators. We have Callie. No options on primaries. She just has a sniper rifle. For secondaries, you either have the good SMG, the bad SMG, or the pistol. So obviously always go the good SMG, SPSMG9. And then for secondaries, Claymores always makes the most sense because Callie's probably going to be on rappel a lot. She's going to be sniping into sight from outside windows, so you put Claymores down to prevent people from jumping out, or if they do jump out and kill you, they at least die. Alright, now we're at Iana, one of my favorite fraggers. She has the G36C or the ARX. I always default to the G36C. Now that being said, Evan has specifically complimented me on my recoil control. He says that this gun is really hard to control, but apparently I control it very well. I don't know if it's just because I use it a lot, but I really like the G36C over the ARX. And then I do bring Gon 6 on her just in case I either need to rush break a barricade or if I need to break some type of bulletproof utility near me. It just helps stop the rush from being slowed down. And then for gadgets, I bring impact EMPs in case, again, there's a bulletproof gadget that I don't want to deal with. I just EMP it, run past it. Very rarely bring smokes. I'd say only bring smokes if you're going to play her more support, but I don't really think she's a support operator. I think she's just a fragger. Here's Ace, who is probably the best DLC breacher, I would say. He has a very default loadout, AK-12, one of the best guns in the game, or M1014, one of the worst shotguns in the game. So obviously you're always going to go AK-12. Never ever run the M1014. It is never a choice. It's not even an option. Just ignore it. No options on the secondary pistols. And then for gadgets, I always default to Claymore because if you're going to go for main wall, you don't really need a breaching charge. It doesn't really help you at all. Now we're on to Zero, who is normally called the one-man army because he can do basically everything himself. But first for primaries, I always go with the SC3000K. MP7 is really good and it has a magnified scope on attack, but the SC3000 is just, I think, better. Even though it's slower fire rate, it's way higher damage, slightly less ammo, and the recoil is kind of the same if not better. And then he's a one-man army because you can bring the Gon 6 to get rid of gadgets. Don't ever bring a pistol, just bring the Gon 6. And then he can also hard breach, so always bring the hard breach charges. And then if you need to get rid of other non-bulletproof gadgets on site, he has his gadget which can get rid of them. So he can do everything himself if you have this exact loadout. And speaking of dealing with bulletproof gadgets and stuff, we have Flores, who just gets rid of every bulletproof gadget. He either has the AR-33 assault rifle or the SR-25 marksman rifle. I do see a lot of people bring the marksman rifle, but AR-33 I think is just better. Because with Flores, you're probably going to destroy a few gadgets, and then you're going to be more of a fragger. You don't really want to sit outside with the DMR just waiting. No options on the pistols, but then for secondary gadgets, either flashes or claymores. And like I said, since you're going to become more of a fragger once you destroy gadgets, I bring stuns. You could bring claymores if you want to stop people from jumping out on you while you're on your drone, but ideally you should be in a safe spot where they can't jump out and kill you. And no, this is not a teenage TikTok boy, this is Osa, even though I have the worst headgear ever on her. This is Osa. She's kind of a shield operator with primaries though. You either have the 5.56 or the PDW9. I do normally default to the PDW9, but I did just use the 5.56 for a video, so I do really like it right now. But I think because you're going to set up like, you know, a camping site with her, PDW9 does make more sense because if they all start rushing you, you want more ammo. No options on the pistols. And then for secondary gadgets, my default is usually impact EMPs because as Osa, you're probably going to help the breacher get the wall. But if you're not going to do that, frags is a good backup. You can do claymores, but I think if you want to cover a window and prevent people from jumping out on you, just put an Osa shield on there. And then this is Sens, who's, in my opinion, objectively the worst attacker in the entire game. But Sens has two guns, the POF-9 and a 417 DMR. Since Sens is kind of more of like a run-and-gun operator, POF just makes more sense. Sens's gadget just puts down a bunch of light walls, so you're probably going to push in with that. DMR, you don't want close quarters. You want an assault rifle close quarters. And it's a 50-round one as well. No options on the pistols, but for secondaries, you either have frags, claymores, or hard breach charges. For some reason, I have claymores selected, but I honestly don't know which one would be better. I don't think you should bring frags because frags will easily destroy your sense gadget, which is not ideal. I think hard breaches would probably be my main choice as just like a supporting hard breacher. But now we're on to Grim, who is, I think, my most played attacker of all time. Love him. He has the 5.52 commando or the shotgun. I've played him probably thousands of rounds, and I've very rarely used a shotgun unless I'm specifically rushing. And then if you do need a shotgun of some kind, you have the bailiff to just help make rotates, break windows, doors, or open up a little bit of the floor. Do not really use this as soft destruction for floor, though. It kind of sucks. And then for secondary gadgets, you have either hard breach charges, impact EMPs, or claymores. I think hard breach charges should be your default. Impact EMPs if you're just going to go support breach, but I think he's a good solo push operator where you can just push from the other side of the map with the hard breach charges. Now we have Brava, who's an operator who, if I play Brava, all my drones get destroyed. If the enemies play Brava, they hack everything. But anyways, with her, you have either the Para or the DMR. I would take the Para because it's actually a somewhat decent gun to control. If it were like Twitch and you had an uncontrollable gun and a DMR, I would take the DMR, but again, Para is actually decent. And then for secondary weapons, it's either a pocket shotty or a pistol, so obviously pocket shotty. For gadgets, Claymore or smoke grenades. I think Claymore you only bring if you're in a similar situation as what I said with Flores, where you're worried people will jump out on you while you're on your drone. But if you're smart and you play safe, bring smoke grenades so that you can just help with plant. And then this is Ram, who is probably the best vertical destruction operator in the game. She has either the R4C or the LMGE. I have heard people argue that the LMG is better because you just want to spray and pray through the floor, but I always take the R4C. I think it's just one of the best guns. Why not take it? No options on the secondary pistols, and then for secondary gadgets, you have either smokes or stuns. Since she is going to be opening up floor a lot, you're probably not going to be stunning through the floor because people aren't going to peek you when they're stunned. So you can just open up the floor and then use smokes, again, cover plant. And we're almost at the end of the attackers. We have Deimos, who has either the AK-74M or the M59. Now, I know I said never bring shotguns in attack, but he is probably one of the few exceptions where you could bring a shotgun because you have the Vendetta pistol, which most people kind of use as their like primary. So you could use the shotgun as a way to make rotates or open up floor, or whatever you want to do with it. So bring the shotgun if you're mainly going to use the pistol. If you're not mainly going to use the pistol, then bring the AK. And then for secondary gadgets, you either have frags or hard breaches. Because Deimos can live track someone, you generally want to live track them and then throw a frag to force them out of their position and then kill them as they're running. So frags are the default choice. Hard breach only if you need it. And then we're on to the last attacker. This took way longer than I thought it was going to. We have Rauora. Everyone always says I pronounce it wrong. She either has a DMR or the LMG. Since, again, LMGs kind of suck, DMR is my default choice. And it helps that she has a machine pistol as a secondary, so you can have some automatic gunning if you want, but this machine pistol is awful. Look at the recoil pattern down there. It is horrendous. You cannot land a shot on someone with this. Only use it in desperate measures. I'd still take it over the GSH pistol, but it's just not a good weapon. And then for secondary gadgets, you have either smokes or breaching charges. I think smokes is the default choice because Rauora is the definition of a like plant operator. So you want to use smokes for plant. Don't think you'd ever really use breaching charges with her unless I guess you're going to use the doors to block above doorways and then breach open the flooring. But I don't think that's really a good idea. And that is all the loadouts for all the attackers. Now we're going to move on to defenders. Now we're on to the second half defenders. We have Sentry, who is the defender version of Striker. For primary weapons, you have the Commando 9 or the M870 shotgun. Commando 9 is the better option. If you're going to run the M870, then run the C75 secondary. But Commando 9 Super Shorty is definitely the best option. And for secondary gadgets, I like to run Nitro Cell comboed with Bulletproof Camera. I put Bulletproof Camera in a room close to sight, C4 below, kill them. It's basically like a budget Valkyrie. But out of all the secondaries, I feel like you should never bring impacts because you can always make rotates with either Super Shorty or the M870. Observation blockers are also kind of trash. So I feel like you either run the Nitro Cell Bulletproof Camera combo or maybe something like Proximity Alarms and Deployable Shield. Our first real defender, we have Smoke. For defenders, they play a little bit differently than attackers. You kind of want to run a lot of shotguns on defense to do site setup, but also Smoke has the SMG-11 as a secondary. So you basically run the shotgun as site setup, and then you run the SMG-11 as your primary weapon. And for secondary gadgets, you can either run barbed wire or proximity alarm. Proximity alarm if you just want to know when someone's pushing in so you can smoke quickly. Or if people are pushing in through barbed wire, then you can smoke them and hurt them more. I personally prefer the barbed wire because with smoke, you're normally holding a shotgun at a corner. And as they push up to the barbed wire, you can swing and shotgun them. And then we have Mute, who's basically going to be the same thing as Smoke. Shotgun primary with SMG-11 secondary. You can run the MP5K, but I think the shotgun, you have to use it for site setup. And then for secondary gadgets, just always run Nitro Cell. Having as many C4s on defense as possible is amazing if you can get people through the floor. And now we have Castle, who at the time of this recording is still disabled, so this shouldn't matter too much, but later on when he's finally fixed and back in the game, Always run the UMP as your primary, never run the M1014. M1014's trash. Even on defense, this shotgun is terrible. And then for secondary, run the Super Shorty because you need some sight setup as Castle. His role is like an architect. You want to be able to create different paths on site. And then for secondary gadget, I personally run Proximity Alarm, but Bulletproof Camera can be good just for some extra intel. I usually like the proxies though because you can put them on doorways. So you have castles covering some doors and windows, proxies covering others. Moving on to Pulse, who basically has almost the same setup as Castle. You're going to be running the UMP as well. Never run the M1014. I guess on Pulse, you could maybe make the case to sometimes run it, but I made a whole M1014 video with Pulse shotgun, and it was still not good. UMP was just always better. You always run the UMP, and then for the 2 pistols, it's the same thing as Ash and Thermite. M45 just does more damage, has slightly less ammo. Now for secondaries, you'll always want C4 on Pulse. You'll never want anything else because his heartbeat scanner can track people, so you want to be able to C4 people through the floor or through a wall. You'll never bring deployable, you'll never bring observation blocker. Always C4. Don't ask me what I have on Doc here. I don't know what this is, but anyways, for Doc, he has 3 primaries, the P90, the MP5, and the SGC QB shotgun. Since he has a shotgun as a secondary, never bring the shotgun on Doc, doesn't make sense. P90 is basically just a pea shooter, but 50 bullets and not crazy recoil. So if you're just going to be a headshot machine, run the P90. Otherwise, run the MP5. It has an ACOG as well, and you can spawn peek with it. It has more damage than the P90, which is basically all you can ask for, but lower than everything else. And then for secondaries, I already kind of told you, you run the Bailiff. You just want that shotgun secondary to help set up sight, make rotates, whatever. And then for gadgets, Bulletproof over barbed wire, I think, any day of the week. Bulletproofs are just harder to get rid of, and they provide actual intel. Barbed wire, you punch twice and it's gone. Now we're on to Rook, who basically has the same setup as Doc. You're going to be running the MP5 primary for the same reasons as Doc. Rook doesn't have the Bailiff, so you're just going to go P9 pistol, because I like it better than revolver. And then for gadgets, you can either go proxies or impacts. Impacts if you need someone to make rotates, otherwise go proxies. Never run observation blockers, they're trash. Here's Kapkan, one of my mains on defense. Unfortunately, they have kind of butchered my boy, but he's still pretty good. He has either the 9x19 SMG or the Sausage Shotgun. Sausage Shotgun is terrible, so run the 9x19. It used to be really good, now it's trash. But the 9x19 is still a very strong weapon. Always run it. Pistols, same as before, PMM over the GSH. And then he used to have a C4, which is what you would always run, but now he has Bulletproof and barbed wire. I just run Bulletproof. It at least combos with his gadget a little bit. You can put a BP camera down and then put traps on a door. People will get focused on the camera, run at the camera, and then just die to the traps. It's better than barbed wire. And we also have Tachanka, who has either the DP27 LMG. He's the only operator in the game who has this gun, or his 9x19. For Tachanka, it's a little bit weird because the LMG does crazy destruction and can open up everything, and it's 2-shot, I think, on any operator in the game, basically. Maybe 3-shot for 3 armors. But he can also put an ACOG on the 9x19. So if you want zoom, 9x19. Otherwise, for every other reason, run the DP27. And then for secondaries, he has the Bearing 9, which is better than both the pistols, so you run the Bearing 9. And then for gadgets, probably deployable shield. You want at least one defender to run deployable shield for some type of extended hold. And it's not bad for him because he can crouch behind it and then shoot his fire. But if you don't want to run deployable shield, run proxy. Now for Jager, you have 2 options, the 416 carbine or the M870 shotgun. 416 is just really, really good. It was for a long time the best defender gun in the entire game, but I think it's slightly lower now, but it has good recoil, really good damage. I'd say run it. It says down here that the recoil pattern is actually not that good, but I feel like anytime I've used it, it's actually very reasonable. No options on the secondary pistols. For gadgets, like I said before, observation blocker sucks, so just run bulletproof camera. For Bandit, we have a similar story. 2 primaries, MP7's just better than the shotgun, so run the MP7. Shotgun is good though, like his M870 is actually pretty decent, so if you want to run around and roam with him, use that, but Bandit's mainly a sight player, so MP7 just makes more sense. No options on the secondary again, and then Nitrocell is just always the better option. If they manage to breach the wall, you just throw a C4 out the breach and hope you get someone. And then here we have Mrs. Master Chief or Frost. For primary weapon, she has the 9mm C1 or the Super 90. Shotguns, while okay on defense, 9mm C1's actually really good. It has really high damage, just super low fire rate. That's its one bad trait. But it's got an ACOG, so that's pretty good. And then as long as you're not running the shotgun primary, run the shotgun secondary. Again, for sight setup. If you are running shotgun primary, then run pistol secondary. And if you're a newer player, which I assume if you're still watching this video at this point, you're definitely newer to the game, run deployable shield. You put a deployable shield on a door, put a frost mat behind it. New players never check that. They just jump over and die to a frost mat. And now with Valkyrie, since she's an intel operator, you might think with cameras in sight, playing below, you might run the shotgun. No, it's still bad. Just run the MPX. It's a really good weapon. Low recoil, headshot machine, so you can just fry people. And then you have no choice but the deagle. And then for secondary, you're obviously going to want to run Nitro Sub, because if you have cameras in sight and you're playing below, you see 4 people through the floor, free kill. I don't think I've ever wanted to run impact grenades on Valkyrie. It just doesn't make sense. C4 is just better. With Caveira, she is a prime roamer, so you have 2 options with M12 and the Spaz 15. I prefer the Spaz 15 because ever since they changed the pistol to be more long range, you don't necessarily need the submachine gun because you can use the pistol at range. So shotgun is your very close quarters weapon, pistol is your long range weapon. And then for secondary gadgets, even though you're running a shotgun, I would still bring impacts because you're probably going to be roaming. In case you get stuck somewhere and you need to get out quick, impact the wall, run away. If for whatever reason you don't think you need impacts, then bring proxies, and then when you hear the proxy alarms going off, you flank as Cav. And for Echo, he has 2 primaries, the MP5 SD and the Supernova. I always run the MP5 if possible. Don't think the Supernova has really ever been necessary other than maybe when it was like a shotgun meta. But MP5 SD is always good because it's actually better than the MP5 whilst being naturally silenced. It has higher damage and a natural silencer, and the recoil is actually not terrible on it. So it's just a really good weapon. And then as a backup, you have the Bearing 9 as your secondary. Don't run the pistol, just the Bearing 9. For gadgets, since Echo is more of an anchor, you might want to bring impacts for sight setup, or you could also bring deployable shield. If someone else has a shotgun, bring deployable shield. Here we have Mira, who's probably one of the most banned defenders in the game. She has the Vector, submachine gun, and the ITA-12L. Never run the ITA-12L. Vector is just insanely good. It has 1,200 rounds per minute fire rate. It is insanely fast. So you run the Vector with the secondary shotgun as your sight setup weapon, and then you bring a C4. This is the only setup for Mira. Legion's going to be kind of a similar story. There really is only one setup. T5 SMG primary, super shorty secondary, and then bulletproof secondary gadget. You normally don't want to change this. If you, for whatever reason, really love shotguns and you really want to bring it, you can bring the shotgun primary and then the pistol secondary, but the T5 is just so strong. Here we're hitting a bit of a soft spot with Ella. She has 2 primaries, the Scorpion and the FO12. I want to tell you guys that the FO12 is the best shotgun in the game because it was my favorite weapon. I used it all the time. I actually used it so much that console started using it a lot, and then they nerfed the shit out of it because it was too strong. So it's pretty weak now. I don't think I can recommend you to run it unless you just want to have fun. It's a fun weapon. Scorpion is just going to be better though. It actually can do damage at range. Shotgun can't do anything at range. No options for secondary weapons, but for secondary gadgets we either have deployable, impact, or barbed wire. Barbed wire I could see being useful for a shotgun play if you're going to hold like a corner or something. Once they punch it, you swing with the shotgun. But for the most part, I'd say deployable or impact. Impact if you're roaming really heavy, deployable if you need a deployable and no one else has one. Now we have Vigil, aka the crash test dummy, who has the K1A or the Boss G. I did mention Boss G on attack is kind of iffy now because the slug damage has fallen off, but on defense it's still pretty good because the attackers have to push you, so you're going to be closer range with the Boss G. I still prefer the K1A, it's a really good gun, so why not run that one instead? And then you always bring the SMG-12 secondary, never the C75. SMG-12 is just better. For gadgets, I always bring impacts because Vigil is the definition of a roamer. You need impacts to get out of sticky situations. I would never bring bulletproof on Vigil. We have Old Man Maestro, who one of my favorite operators. While I do love the ACS-12 because it is a very meme weapon, I think the Alda is just better. It's an LMG, and he's the definition of anchor, so you want to just spray and pray with that and mow down all the attackers as they push in last minute. So you bring the Alda primary, and then you bring the Bailiff secondary. As per usual, if you do end up swapping the primaries, you swap the secondaries as well. Impacts aren't necessary on Maestro. I mainly bring them because I like to play Maestro from below sight. I put all the cameras in sight, and then I will just use them to watch people since they're bulletproof. And when someone goes for the plant, I impact and then shoot them with that Alda, because impacts stop people from planting. Now for Alibi, your setup's going to very much depend on what you want to do. The main thing I try to do with Alibi is just sit on my Alibi Prismas and try to trick people. So I run like default MX4 Storm to try to blend in as much as possible. Now, if you don't care about tricking people, both MX4 Storm and ACS-12 are good, but MX4 Storm is just better. Again, low damage, but very high fire rate. You hit one shot to the head, they're dead. Why not run that? And then if you're running the MX4 Storm, you run the Bailiff to make rotates on sight. For gadgets, I'd say bring proxy over observation blocker, although there is a strat with observation blocker where you put them down next to the prismas and then people don't see the prismas when they drone because observation blocker blocks it. And then when they push in, they'll instinctively shoot the prisma and then you can swing on them because they're getting pinged. I don't think that's a great strat to rely on, so I'd still say bring proxy alarms instead. And Clash is the most recently reworked operator. You're going to want to bring the SP SMG-9 pistol. You're going to want to bring the SP SMG-9 machine pistol because everything else is just kind of trash with her. You're trying to be aggressive with Clash. You want to go for kills. This is basically a pocket F2. Twitch's gun that was like really insane. This is almost the exact same stat line as that. And then for secondary gadgets, I would bring impacts if you need to do site setup, but most people should have something for that, so you don't need to. Barbed wire kind of combos with Clash, because if you walk past it, you can then put down the shield while they're dealing with the barbed wire, and then you shoot them with your gun. It just helps keeps a bit of a gap between the attackers and you. And now we have Kaid. Yes, that is how his name is pronounced. People always get upset when I say it the proper way. He has the AUG A3 SMG and then the TCSG Slug Shotgun. Both are very good. TCSG got a buff and a nerf recently where it does more damage but less damage at a distance. So it can fry, but it does also have some recoil that can make it a little bit unruly and only 10 bullets. So if you're going to panic a little bit, I'd probably just bring the AUG. AUG is just very reliable. Now for pistols, you either have the revolver or the scoped-in pistol. Scoped-in pistol, like I said, is pretty trash, so I will always bring the revolver. And then for secondary gadgets, C4 is the best. It always is the best. Bring it no matter what. You could argue bringing barbed wire and Kaid because his claw combos with the barbed wire, but I don't think that's worth changing off of a C4 for. And now we have Mozzie, which... Quick shout out to the Mozzie pizza skin, best skin they've ever released. I wish they did more of these. For his loadout, I would bring the Commando 9 myself, but everyone else really likes the P10 Roni. P10 Roni does significantly less damage, but at a much higher fire rate. My issue with it, it has 15 bullets. That is nothing. Commando 9 at least has 26. So personally, I'm bringing the Commando 9 every time. No options on the pistols, and then for gadgets, since he's an intel operator, C4. Next, we have Warden, who you might see different answers for depending on who you're watching, but I normally like just running the shotgun primary with the SMG-12 secondary, but I do know a lot of people like running the MPX because the MPX is just a good weapon. But I like shotgun for making rotates, and then the SMG-12, at least for me, isn't terrible, so I can still control it and use that as my SMG weapon. I don't need two SMGs necessarily. But honestly, I don't think you can go wrong with running either of these primaries. I think it depends on what the site setup calls for and what your team has. And then for gadget, shockingly, I do run deployable shield a lot on Warden because he is kind of the definition of an anchor, especially with the shotgun. You're going to set up the shield and then just hold a point until you die. Deployable shield helps a lot with that because then you can hide behind it. Now, if you want to be more of a roamer, that's when you'd probably run the MPX and then also run the Nitrocell with it. Now, Goyo, I am going to let you guys know I have a feeling he's going to get nerfed soon. He is very, very strong right now, but for the time being, this is what his setup is, and I think you can't go wrong with this. Vector. Amazing gun, always run it. TCSG is also good, but Vector is just insane. Why would you not run it? No options on the pistols, and then for secondary gadgets, I run impacts on him. If you're running the TCSG, then you can swap to either proxies or bulletproof. Honestly, either or is fine depending on what you want for your site setup. I'd probably default to bulletproof over proxy most of the time, but you don't need impacts when you have the shotgun because the shotgun can make rotates. I forgot how fancy Wamai looks, but here's Wamai. For primaries, he has the AUG A2 and the MP5K. I love the AUG. I really want to use it more, but like I said before, the AUG does take up like 90% of your screen, so it's probably not a great idea. MP5K is just standardly good weapon. But AUG does 12 more damage for only 80 less fire rate. So if I'm going with my heart, I'm choosing the AUG, but MP5K is probably better for you guys. And then for pistols, he either has the Italian revolver or the P12. Italian revolver is just really good. Better than the French revolver, significantly better. And does way more damage than the P12, so I'd run the Keratos. And for gadgets, I'd probably bring impacts just for site setup. If you don't need it, bring proxies. Now we're on to one of my favorite defenders, Oryx. Love running the T5 on him. Never run the Spaz 12. Spaz 12 sucks. T5, amazing gun. Comboed with the Bailiff secondary for rotates and site setup, amazing. His gadget is also really good for site setup, so you don't need to worry about rotates necessarily with the Bailiff. And then I do normally run barbed wire on him just for any good choke point that I can think of. But proxy is probably the better choice. My default is barbed wire though. We got Slack-jawed Malusia there whose jaw actually shakes. For her loadout, she has either the MP5 or the Super 90. MP5, like on Dock and Rook, is just a really good gun, so why not run it? And then you have the secondary shotgun for site setup. I would not really recommend switching off of these two. For gadgets, I would bring a bulletproof camera to combo. She has 4 bulletproof gadgets, for the most part bulletproof. And then a bulletproof camera on top of that, that's 5 total. That's a lot of utility that they're going to have to waste to destroy everything. And then you don't need impacts because you have a secondary shotgun. I know this looks nothing like a Rooney, but it is a Rooney. For her primary weapon, she has the P10 Rooney, again the 15 bullet SMG or the MK14 DMR. DMRs are very rare on defense, so I'd highly recommend bringing this. It fries attackers because very few people run 3 armor attackers, so 2-shot any attacker in the game. No pistol options other than that one. And then for gadgets, bring the bulletproof because she has bulletproof gadgets. That wastes a lot of utility. Bulletproof camera wastes even more utility. And here we have Thunderbird, who I'm sad to say is pretty bad now, but if you are going to run her, I recommend the Spear 308. It is already a pretty good gun on attack. On defense, it is insane. Very, very strong assault rifle. I can't say I would normally recommend bringing the shotgun, unless you're going to go shotgun bearing 9. But my preferred setup is Spear 308 with pocket shotgun secondary. And Thunderbird is meant to be more of an anchor because of her gadget, so you could bring deployable shield. But if you just want to roam, I'd probably bring bulletproof camera just for some intel for when you're going to flank later. For Thorn, I'd really only recommend running her unique primary, which is the UZK. M870 is decent, but like this gun is actually pretty strong. And I know I always said before to never run the C75, but a machine pistol is always better than a normal pistol, so a C75 over the 1911. And normally I'd always say bring deployable shield over barbed wire, but barbed wire actually combos well with her gadget because the gadget is a bomb that detonates if you walk by it. So barbed wire will slow people down, keep them within the range, and they might die to it, especially in the lower ranks. Azami is one of my favorite operators, so for her loadout, I'd recommend bringing the 9x19 because if you're going to use your zombies to try to make an aggressive setup, the 9x19 is really good close range. But that doesn't mean that you can't use her long range. I've seen a lot of people use the ACS-12 with great success. It has an ACOG, it's a slug shotgun, so you can use her from really far away too. So for range, ACS-12, for close quarters, 9x19. But also keep in mind that the ACS-12 did get nerfed at range, so it's going to do less damage the farther away you are. And then for secondary weapons, Deagle is the only option. If you're bringing the 9x19, bring impacts. If you're bringing the ACS-12, bring barbed wire. And now we've gotten to Solus, who, it just makes me sad. She is so awful now. Worst operator on defense by far. Which has 2 options, either the P90 or the ITA-12L. This is probably one of the only operators I'd say shotgun is almost worth it, because her whole kit was meant to be kind of like plant denial. She can scan from below sight, and if she sees the diffuser, you can shotgun them through the floor. But her gadget did get nerfed into oblivion, so she's more of a roamer now, so I'd probably prefer the P90 over the shotgun. And then you are forced to use the SMG-11 secondary, which makes the shotgun a better option because you can just use the SMG-11 when you're roaming, and then ITA-12L when you're in close range. And then for secondary gadgets, I think it depends on your playstyle. If you're going to roam and try to be more adaptable, then bring proxies to try to defend your area. But if you just want to leave something on site for your team to have, then just bring a bulletproof. We're nearing the end for the defenders, by the way, but we're on to Fenrir now, who is very strong. He has either the MP7 or Sausage. Sausage has its place because Fenrir can blind people, but obviously MP7 is just going to be way better. Even in close range, it just fries people with high fire rate. So you bring the MP7 primary, and then you bring the Bailiff secondary for site setup, and observation blockers are trash, so you're left with the bulletproof camera as your secondary gadget. Next we have Tubby, who has either the MPX, like I said before, very strong weapon, or the AR-15, which is an incredibly strong DMR, but again limited by 10 ammo. But it's on defense, where you can 2-shot any attacker. So I always default to the AR-15. I think it's awesome, and it feels so satisfying with the silencer when you just like one-tap an attacker as they run in. It just feels so nice. No options for secondary weapons, but for secondary gadgets, you have either Nitrocell or Proximity Alarm. Since you're probably going to play more as a roamer, whether it's whatever primary weapon you run, C4 just makes more sense. You can C4 through the floor or through a wall. Proximity Alarm just doesn't work well with him. And now we're on to the final defender, Skopos, which funnily enough has the least amount of options out of any operator in the game. No primary options, no secondary options, just one of each. And since I can't give you much advice on the loadout, I'll just tell you this, one little fun fact. Each Skopos bot, because she has 2 of them, has different ammo counts. So if you use all your ammo on Robot A, when you swap to Robot B, you have fully fresh ammo. So keep that in mind if you're ever worried about conserving ammo, you have double the amount of anyone else. Just waste away. Now for secondary gadget, I always bring impacts because Skopos is a roamer. You need to be able to run around and get away from people if possible. So impacts allow you to do that. Impacts do not replenish on each robot though. You only have 2 across both robots. I can't really recommend ever bringing Proximity Alarm because it just doesn't make sense with her kit. But that is it. That is all the loadouts for all of the operators in all of Siege. I hope you guys found this somewhat useful. I normally don't make videos like this anymore because I have mainly made all of my informational content on TikTok and YouTube Shorts now. But I did mention this on stream not that long ago, and a lot of people said they really wanted to hear what is the best loadout, because a lot of you are coming into Siege X completely new to the game or haven't played in years and you don't know what the best loadouts are anymore. But it is important to mention, and this goes for every operator, there is no such thing as this is the only possible loadout. I know I said that for some operators like Ace, where I said you should never run the M1014, but Siege is all about experimentation and fun. Even if the M1014 is trash and it probably won't do well, have fun and just use it anyways. If you're going for just best possible results, then obviously the AK is going to be better, but don't limit yourself, just have a good time. That's how I approach the game. I try to just have fun, mess around with different weapons and different strats. That's why a lot of my videos are using X weapon for whatever hours, because I just want to try and have fun. I want to try new things, because playing the same thing all the time is very boring. Broaden your horizons, try different operators, try different loadouts. But if you need the best loadout, everything I mentioned in this video should be pretty accurate. But thank you guys for watching. If you do want to see more educational content, especially for newer players, go watch the TikToks and shorts. They're a lot more digestible than this video that's probably going to be over an hour long. I have a lot of good stuff out there to help you guys learn the game. Thank you again for watching. See ya.